And I'll start with just a few minutes, Steph, to talk a little bit about launch and what this panel series is, and then I'll pass the torch to you.
Sounds great.
All right, awesome. So welcome everyone. Welcome to the Gender and Sexuality, Identity, Affinity Community panel of the Launch Communities panel series of Launch Expo, Fall 2020. We're really excited to have you here. We have a fantastic panel today. We have a fantastic moderator today, and all the people who contributed to making this happen. You know, it has been such a wonderful collaboration and opportunity. My name is Daniel Pasco. I am Associate Provost for Immersive Learning and Career Design at Drew. And I'll just spend maybe 3-4 minutes talking a little bit about launch to give you some context of where this comes from and what we're trying to do. And then I'll pass it on to Steph to help us moderate the panel and learn about these fantastic stories and advice that the panelists have for us today. So let me talk to you very quickly in a nutshell about launch. If you go to launch.drew.edu, you'll find a launch platform. We call it Launchpad. And if you scroll down a little bit on the main page, then you see this map here that kind of goes a little into what launch is. Launch is an institutional initiative. It is what we call a new approach to undergraduate education, and it is the curriculum of our students, of our undergraduate students, as of last first year class. So this is the second class that is going through the launch experience. Launch has three goals. One is to help students identify a purpose at a time when 87% of the world's workforce is struggling to find meaning in what they do, according to a Gallup survey. The second goal is to help students to prepare for their careers at a moment when not only we're expecting students to change jobs, most often in different industries, 11.9 times in their lifetime. And for 86% of the careers students will pursue are careers that don't exist yet. Things are moving very fast and changing very quickly. And also to prepare them as a third goal for their impact in the community and the world when the challenges we're facing have become so systemic and are affecting all of us one way or another. So purpose, career, and impact. And then launch comes to life based on seven high impact practices that you see here represented in this map. The first one is a course that introduces all students in their second semester to launch and engages them in all things launch and is connected with an e-portfolio called the Launch Plan. Just give you a very quick idea of that. Here is the main page of the Launch Plan. You see the curriculum of what students go through as they learn more about themselves and their purpose and what matters out there to them in the community and the world, their paths, engaging with communities, mentors, and experiences to begin to assess what their paths are expecting from candidates and to develop an action plan. And then each of these gears is a page where students can reflect, gather learning artifacts, get feedback, right, and begin to curate a portfolio. So these are two very important curricular components of launch. The third curricular component is immersive experiences. Students have to do at least 2 of them. What we do is we identify the criteria that make experiences meaningful. And then they can do any of 6 types of immersive experiences, all of which then show in students' transcripts and are part of the curriculum. They do 2, they can do as many as they want. These 3 curricular components have a very intentional focus on the development of transferable skills. We have identified 12 on which we focus, and interaction with mentors. And then we try to scaffold that through making communities available to students. Have career communities, we have 10, and we have identity affinity communities. So you can see them here. The career communities are industry clusters of networks and programming, and then web spaces that feed data from multiple systems. And then we have identity affinity communities, and we have 8 of them, one of which is gender and sexuality, on which we're focusing today. So just to give you a couple of ideas of how that looks like, here is the menu of options, including recommending content and feedback, but you have opportunities and mentors and blogs and events and all of these curated and specific to the particular community. People who identify with the community and who want to work with students who identify with the community. Success stories, and then you have internships and jobs, resources, industry guides, student organizations, new courses, special electives. And then similar to that, ta-da, we have our gender and sexuality identity affinity community with Alyssa there on the main image. And then we have a similar distribution of resources that are specific, and mentors and blogs and internship and job databases and events and success stories and resources, student organizations, courses, special electives, etc. Now, part of launch is programming that we do. So you see here that we have the 2020 Launch Expo with 3 main programs. The Launch Community Panel Series, that of which we're part right now. We have 18 communities, therefore we have 18 panels this term. We have done 6. This is the 7th one in the fall. And then we have a Launch Immersive Experiences Fair where students, this was last Friday, students presented their immersive experiences, and this is recorded so you can go in and watch them anytime and see what immersive experiences students have done and how to engage in them. And then we have on October 23rd a communities fair, which will have a booth for each community with a diversity of different resources and opportunities and stories for each one of the 18 communities. Now, if you click on the Find a Panel in the Launch Panel series, then you get to this page where you have each of the communities and when the corresponding panel will take place. So you can see here the gender and sexuality, and you see our fantastic panel today with Castle and Rachel and Elisa and Dawn. And then you see, for example, here Thursday's panel, which is the Education K-12 with this corresponding panel. So get engaged. This is a fabulous way of connecting, networking at a time when it's a little challenging to do that otherwise. So please take advantage of that. I have posted in the chat today's program, which includes the questions we're going to be asking and the links to the panel page as well as to the community page. We have noticed that these virtual experiences, as fatiguing as they feel, because we're in Zoom most of the day, it offers also an opportunity for us to engage mentors and alums from further out, right? Because it's virtual. So we can engage, like Castle is participating from Mexico, which would otherwise be difficult to do if we were face-to-face. And it also offers, we've noticed an augmented reality opportunity where you can be browsing through the stories of the panelists. You can be browsing through the page as you're engaging and knowing what questions are coming to prepare for additional questions you might want to ask. So we encourage you to be absorbing as much as you can during today's session. But without further ado, let me stop there and pass the torch to Steph to guide us through the mentoring of this incredible panel and today's wonderful program.
Awesome. Thank you, Daniel. Hi, everybody. My name is Steph Mazzarella. I am the Director of Student Engagement here at Drew. And I also serve as the coordinator for this identity affinity community, which is pretty awesome. And I'm super excited to moderate this tonight to tell you a little bit about me. I'm a very proud Drew alum. I graduated in 2002, and I actually was an English major with a women's and gender studies minor. So this topic, this discussion is very close to my heart. So I'm super excited to introduce our four panelists. I'm going to read you their names, and then we'll jump right into our questions, and I'll have them introduce themselves. So we have Castle Franco Garibay, we have Dawn Harbatkin, Alyssa Soleo, and Rachel Sawyer. We have some really awesome, we have some alum, we have a current staff member, we have a new alum, and it's just, I'm really excited to jump in. So without further ado, I'm going to ask the first question, and then this is really a conversation, right? I don't need to call on anybody. Just jump in. Whatever order you guys would like to go is totally fine. And then if there are questions that you'd like to share in the chat, if you'd like to send them just to me, that's fine, and I'll ask them. Or if you'd like to pose them to everyone, that's fine. Or if you'd like to raise your hand, we'll try to get to you during the discussion or towards the end when we do some breakout questions and answers. Okay? All right, so first question, could you please introduce yourself by sharing your major, minor, and degree, your current position, and highlights of your career path leading to what you do today? Who would like to jump in first?
I saw Rachel just looked away. So
I know,
Rachel
you're on
Rachel
top of my
just
screen.
looked away. She was like, I will not engage. So I can start.
Thanks, Cass.
My name is Castle. I graduated in May. My pronouns are she, her, hers. I graduated with a double major in Women's and Gender Studies and International Relations, and I had a minor in Latin American Studies. So right now I am working as a consultant for the Population Council. This is something that I actually started when I was at Drew. So I started with an internship at the Population Council in February of last year. And I work with the Indigenous Adolescent Girls Empowerment Network, and I do a lot of research for them. Right now I run their social media. So if you run a social media for like a student club right now, this will be helpful in the future. You can really get paid for that in the real world. So that's great. So that's what I'm doing right now, but I am going to start another project with the Population Council by the end of this calendar year. And I'm going to be doing research on gender-based violence, which I actually did earlier on my Drew career. I was a paralegal intern at Morris County Organization for Hispanic Affairs, which I got because my boss was actually a Drew alum. And when I was there, I was working with survivors of domestic violence that were filing to get their own visas because the perpetrator of their violence was probably their husband. So their visa was dependent on their abuser. So that was very interesting work that I did. And I'm glad that maybe like 3 years later, I'm using it on my career outside of Drew.
Awesome, thank you. Rachel, do you want to go next?
Yes, I'll go. I'm good. Hello, everyone. My name is Rachel Sawyer. My pronouns are she, her, her. So the question was, I'm a staff member at Drew. My title is Coordinator of Residential Engagement for Diversity Programming. I have a couple other hats as well. I'm also a community coordinator for Ethnic and Racial Heritage under Launch. So shout out to that area. So I got my bachelor's degree at Eastern Connecticut State University in communications, and my minor was women's studies. So shout out to the women's studies minors and majors. And then I went to Rutgers University to receive my master's degree in higher education. And I essentially kind of got into the work that I do. I was a shocker, an RA in undergrad, and as a queer Black woman, I was like, whoa, like I would love to make this a career where I get to support marginalized students, particularly looking at students with my identities as well. And that's kind of how I got really passionate and excited. A lot of you all know me as really passionate about diversity, equity, and inclusion. And so that's kind of how I got started. So thank you.
Thank you so much. Dawn, would you like to go next?
Yes, looking for the unmute button. Sorry about that. Been on Zoom all day. You'd think I'd know how to do this. My name is Dawn Harbatkin. My pronouns are she, her, hers. I am a Drew alum. I graduated in 1990, so older than a bunch of you, with a major in biology and a minor in women's studies. I then went to medical school, largely because that's what I had always planned to do, and then got there and I was like, wait, what? But got through medical school, did medical school at Columbia, and then residency in the Bronx at Montefiore Medical Center. And I think the way that I have been a physician throughout my career has been greatly shaped by my experiences at Drew, much less the curriculum, but more so the community at Drew. I lived in the Women's Concerns House. I think that was very influential for me in terms of how I thought about things and how I thought about who I wanted to be in the world and what kind of impact I wanted to make in the world. I think that that was equally shaped by the minor I did in women's studies. So right out of residency, I got a job at Callan Lord Community Health Center, which is an LGBT community health center in New York City. Felt very, very, very lucky to get that job. It was like a dream job for me, and I was there for 7 years, sort of moved my way up into out of clinical care and into sort of mix of clinical and administrative care. Wanted to make a change after that time, ended up in California, where I am now, working at Lyon Martin Women's Health Services, which then became Lyon Martin Health Services, which is an LBT, Women and Trans Folks Community Health Center in San Francisco. Did that for another 10 years that I was there, and then did a whole career shift at the age of 50 of like, I just need to do something else, and now work in addiction medicine, which is very, very different than what I've done the rest of my career, but still has that mission-oriented drive where I get to really help communities that are struggling, help people that are struggling to lead happier and healthier, more satisfying lives. And it feels equally good. I have been incredibly lucky to love my work my entire career, which I think is pretty unique.
Thank you so much for sharing that.
Yeah.
Alyssa, do you want to round us out?
Hello, everyone. I'm Alyssa Saleo. My pronouns are she, her, hers. I am a current Drew student. I'm a member of the class of 2022. Do those numbers make sense? After a day of Zoom classes, nothing really makes sense, but I'm super happy to be here, and thank you so much for inviting me and including me. I'm a theater arts major. I'm focusing on playwriting, dramaturgy, and theater history. I'm also a Spanish minor. I'm a Baldwin Honor student, a Drew Civic Scholar, and at the moment, a mentor for an incredible cohort of Drew Action Scholars. They are incredible people, and they are currently changing the world. Not even going to say they're gonna. They are currently changing the world. I'm an orientation committee member, which is my favorite thing in the world, tied with being a resident of the Women's Concerns House. I'm so excited to hear that you were a resident, Dawn. I definitely have to talk with you about that. I am talking to you from South Jersey, where I was born and raised. When I got to Drew, I had been in touch with my passion for the intersection of theater and social movements, and it took some time to connect to the right projects and find ways to articulate the impacts I wanted to make. I'm finding that I get to fulfill these dreams through dramaturgy and also through campus engagement and mentorship. Essentially, any project or role that says, welcome, I'm happy to have you here, that's what I like to do. And Drew has helped me do that in many ways, through mentorship, through theater projects. And you know, even as a junior, there's still new things coming. So I'm always happy to discover them.
Awesome. Thank you so much for all of that. We really have such a wide range of panelists and experiences. So let's just move on to our next question. So how has your journey been impacted by your identity and your reality? What challenges and opportunities have sort of influenced your choices, your strengths, and who you've become? So, you know, how has all of that sort of shaped kind of where you are now? And let's see, I guess I should call on folks. So Castle, do you want to go first?
Yeah, I can go first. So basically, when I first started looking at college, I was interested in international relations, period. But I'm a queer woman, right? So I only looked at schools that had a women and gender studies program, even though I didn't want to study it, because I just wanted, like, the bare minimum you can do to care about women and queer people is to have a program, right? So I like limited my list like that. But then, I mean, I was bored. I was looking at all of these colleges. So I started looking at the programs, and then I realized that it sounded fascinating and that I actually did want to do that. So in the end, I chose to go to the US and study because I could start my women and gender studies education in undergrad, whereas in Mexico, I would have had to wait for my master's. right? And I wanted to get started right away. So I went from, I just want them to have it to I want to have it right now. So I did that. And it was mostly because of my identity as a queer woman that I left Mexico to get this education. But once I got to the US, it was my Mexican identity kind of like jumped out, you know? So I was not the only queer people around for the first time in my life, but I was the only Mexican around for a very long time at Drew. So it was that part of my identity that like jumped out. And then I focused on Latin American studies, and I made sure that every paper that I had the opportunity to write, like I circled back to my identity and like where I wanted to end up. Because in the end, the goal is to return to Mexico and do the work there. But I am well aware that we have ways to go before I could get the education that I got at Drew in Mexico. So I'm very fortunate that I was able to do that, and that I have parents that supported me to do that. But right now, all of the work that I did at Drew was 100% a product of who I am and how I identify.
Thank you so much. Let's see, Rachel, do you want to jump in?
Yes, thank you, Steph. Yeah, so my identity has definitely been impacted in many different ways. I feel like I constantly navigate spaces that were not designed for me as a queer Black woman. And so and also tables, right? See at the table, I feel like I had to make my own table sometimes. And so having so many intersecting identities, I think one of the challenges was like, you know, people often tell you, well, you have to put your Blackness before being a woman, and you have to put you know, all these things before being queer. But you know, in that I kind of learned through how to be like resilient with everything that has gone on in my life. And again, just like I was kind of like impacted being at a predominantly white institution in my undergrad, and I was like, you know, I am experiencing this, but I want to make sure that students, when I'm older, like students don't have to feel like alone, and they might have like a staff member to go to or talk to that might, you know, empathize or have similar experiences to them. And I realized that like I wanted to make that my career path. So I did find strength in that. And I think sometimes in general, people tend to, with marginalized identities, they tend to like see it as a weakness and like try to teach you like, oh, like you should feel bad for, you know, being Black or being a woman or being queer or these different things. But I really see it as a strength to educate others and to really share my story so people feel less alone. So yeah, that's my answer. Thank you.
Thank you. Dawn, would you like to go next?
Sure. So can you say the question one more time? Sorry, Steph.
No worries, absolutely. So how has your journey been impacted by your identity, your reality? So what challenges kind of and opportunities have influenced your choices, your strengths, and who you've ultimately become?
So I was very out as a lesbian when I was at Drew, and I went to medical school thinking that the world at Drew was going to be the world. And in 1990 in medical school, that wasn't true at all. So I came out like right in the beginning of medical school, which, you know, I don't know if it was good or bad. It certainly made medical school very, very hard, where a lot of the other women wouldn't talk to me because they were afraid of being seen as man-hating. And a couple of us, of the more feminist, progressive folks in my class would come in the room and the guys would hiss at us. It was hard. It was really, really, really hard. And I learned later, there were other lesbians in the class and they just knew better than to come out. And so I think a lot, and I've done a lot of work with medical schools about like, how do you make spaces for queer students? And so when I was looking into residency, I did this whole debate of like, okay, do I just be way out and disclose my identity and do it loudly and do it everywhere and find a space where I'm going to feel safe? Or do I shut up and find the training program that's going to be the one that's going to make me the best doctor, right? And feeling stuck in making some of those choices, I think in the 90s was really challenging. And I'd love to say it's all better today. I think it is better than it was then, but it's not a lot better. And I think that I struggled a lot with trying to figure out how to make those decisions, decided to be very, very out in residency programs. Definitely lost some residencies, but you know, I guess I didn't want to be there anyway, right? It wouldn't have been a good space for me. And picked a residency program that celebrated who I was and what I believed in, and really trained me to practice medicine in a way that fit with those beliefs, doing community-oriented primary care, working in community health centers, and trying to figure out how to impact people's lives and be a part of a community. And so I think those early, so that perspective that I then was trained in residency, in addition to like how to manage high blood pressure, I think impacted my choice in career all the way through the rest of my career. Working in queer health, right? I got to be gay for pay, which is really fun, really, really fun. And I would encourage everybody who has the opportunity to do that to spend some time doing that. But now that I'm older and making different choices, I feel like I'm struggling with some of the same issues of like, where's my identity and who I am and what I believe in, and all the work that I've done up until now, how does that fit into the work that I'm doing in addiction medicine, which isn't so focused on identity, or at least I'm hoping that people don't identify as addicts. I don't think that's a helpful thing for them to do. And so moving away from identity into this other world, like how much do I disclose? How do I create safety? I do know that when I have queer folks and trans folks coming in with addiction, that I think about them differently and I treat them more sensitively and I get them in a different way that I think makes their experiences better. It helps them get into and stay in recovery and feel like they can be more themselves in that way. But I think that where that all fits for me, and now that I'm in positions of being able to hire, how I think about hiring and bringing people into my practice, and how do we reflect the people that we're serving, and what does that look like, and how do I help elevate voices for people of color, and how do I support people, trans folks, and all of that stuff has really been shaped by who I am and where my identity fits.
Thank you so much for sharing that, and thank you for all that you had to go through, because the folks that you are now, the folks that you're now treating, I mean, they're in such better hands as a result of it. So thank you for that. It was very powerful. Yeah. Alyssa.
When I heard this question, I couldn't help but think about like the cycle of mentorship. And I know one question specifically talks about mentorship, but I wanted to bring it up, and I could sound like a broken record because to me, that's like my passion is mentorship and peer-to-peer like relationships and support. I'm just thinking a lot about how that's a lot of the most prominent experience at Drew, having been only 2 years in, but also like projecting into the future what could happen. And I'm thinking about how all the ways I had to seek support from juniors, from seniors, even from sophomores at Drew, whether they be RAs or people in my classes or people in my theater department. One of those people is right here in this room, Castle, my RA for my first year. And I'm thinking about, all the love. And I'm thinking about how those struggles that LGBT folks go through, how special it is that we turn it around to help others, and not to put the rose-colored glasses on all of it, because I wish none of that would ever happen because it's not necessary. But at the same time, and this is thinking on a macro level, but just the work of LGBT advocates since time immemorial, forever, like the ways that we weave community. And now being a junior and thinking about the ways I can support incoming students, one of my favorite things in the world is the new student LGBT new student meetup that the orientation program offers. I've gotten to be a leader of that program for the past 2 years, and it's just the most exciting event for me to welcome all these folks in and just think about all the incredible things they're going to do. And the relationship goes both ways too, because I can't tell you how many times I'm going to say mentees just as a simplistic term, because it's more than that. They have their own identities as well. But, you know, through challenging times of my own, how many times they've been the ones to help me, because that's community. It is everyone helps each other. And that's what I was thinking about when this question was posed.
That's a great segue. So I'm going to put you on the spot. So our next question, as you mentioned, is about mentors. So how would you recommend students procure a network of mentors to support their growth? You can do it, Alyssa, since you're in the mentorship realm right now.
Great. I would encourage all students to know that the mentors they're destined to have may not be within their disciplines immediately, but they're going to have skills and insight that will be critical for your past, because there is so much overlap. And that statement sounds like an understatement, just thinking about college, how much overlap and I'm seeing within my classes, within my projects. I mean, to use a career development buzzword of transferable skills, it's really there. Knowing that these folks will be professors, they will be guests. I mean, I'm thinking guest artists because I'm a theater major, but they'll be guest artists. They'll be your RAs. They will be the second year student who sits next to you in your class. And they will also be the people you're in class with. They will be the people that you are in the same year in, and they'll be the folks who come in when you're a sophomore and they're a first year, and they will teach you so much. So that isn't necessarily like an acquiring mentor tool, but I wanted to put that out there because I'm looking at, my mental list of mentors, and they're all over the place, literally as in geographically and also figuratively in their fields of study.
Thank you for letting me put you on the spot. I appreciate that. The whole question, I jumped in because Alyssa sort of segued so well, but the whole question is, what mentors really supported your development, and how would you recommend that students procure a network? So let's go right to Castle.
Yeah, I mean, I had great mentors at Drew. I mean, from Wendy and Carolina, who are sitting right here. I think Wendy was very patient with me, being like, I'm an international relations major, but I want to focus on women. To me, I want to go to grad school for gender studies. Can you please write my recommendation letter? So Wendy was very patient on that, and I think she enjoyed my progression. But I think, I mean, I had incredible mentors outside and inside of the classroom, as Elisa saying, you really never know when a person is going to turn out to be a mentor. And also it doesn't have to be like the mentor TM, it can be a mentor about something specific, like when I came in and I saw Steph, I was like, this is going to be a great place for me. Like I feel included immediately. And it was something that I took when I became an RA, right? Like, how do I make sure that my residents know that I'm going to be inclusive and supportive no matter who they are the second they see me, so it's something that you learn, and it doesn't have to be like your academic advisor or anything like that. Like anyone can be a mentor in a moment. With that said, I do think that a good tip that I have for how to get a good network of mentors is to really get to know the mentors and let the mentors get to know you, because that's how like the most unexpected things happen. Because I was very close to my Latin American studies advisor, Maria. I got to go to an all paid for research trip to Ecuador because I told her what I was interested in, and it just turned out to be aligned to the research that she was doing. So I got to go with her, because I was interested in indigenous affairs and studies. My advisor at the UN semester, he pushed me to get the internship that I am now fully employed for. So like you really never know when someone has exactly your dream job or your dream internship or your dream, like, I don't know, conference, movie recommendation, anything. And the only way you're going to get that is if your mentor knows who you are and what you're interested in. So I know it's very scary to get to know people and, open up like that, but it really is the only way that you're going to get like a meaningful experience with your mentors.
Thank you so much for that. Rachel, do you want to go next?
Yes. Castle, you pointed out something I was gonna say. I was like, Steph is a really great mentor here. I know I came here, I was like, I'm home.
You guys are very kind.
But yeah, I think when I was thinking about this question, I know it also mentioned like mentors that might have supported you or and stuff like that. And I think about like identity. I think that was the biggest thing when reading this question. I think I was very intentional about making sure I had Black mentors, especially in grad school. Like my professor, she was a true Black queen. And also I found a mentor within my field, something that Castle was talking about. He worked at Rutgers and now he's like a EEO of like of diversity at like William Patterson. So I thought that was really important. And kind of like experiencing a lot of racial trauma in grad school, they kind of like took me under their wings. And I don't think I would be standing here today with 2 degrees without them. And so that's something important. So like my advice would definitely be find mentors who validate you, because a lot of, especially with different identities, you get invalidated or feel invalidated quite often. And then find mentors who care about your well-being and your joy. Like I remember they will always be like, what have you been doing for self-care, right? So I think that's really important. But again, there's not like the mentor like Castle was talking about. There's, you have to like find different people that will support different things for you. And so it's just important to find, for me, to find mentors with similar identities, if possible, because sometimes it's hard to, especially with everything going on in the world, making sure you have a mentor or someone that just understands what you have to go through without having to explain it. And yeah, don't be afraid to ask. Like I literally went up to my mentor, who was my professor in grad school, and was like, will you be my mentor? And she was super happy to do it, because a lot of the times, especially like in higher ed, a lot of us go into the field wanting to become someone's mentor. And so if you're a student now, I guarantee you like most people want to be a mentor to some students. So take advantage of that and open up and stuff like that. So yeah, thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Dawn, do you want to round us out?
Sure. I'm listening to all you folks talk, and I was thinking about these questions this morning and being like, mentors, that's not something I was very good at. I didn't have a lot of good mentors. But in listening to you all talk, I realized how many I actually had. I didn't call them mentors or think about them as mentors. So I think that's the interesting part, is you're thinking about approaching people or having people support you. Some of the people who were most supportive for me, someone who connected me to an incredible summer research project that I got to do while I was at Drew, where I got to go in, as part of it, I got to go into an operating room and operate and see what that was like. And that was through a connection from a Drew faculty member who knew somebody who knew somebody. I had an amazing friend who was a little older than me and a little bit wiser than me, who really pulled me through medical school. I think of as a mentor. I mean, I think there are some times where you're like, this person, I really appreciate them and love the way they look at the world and would like them to support me. And that is like the mentor role. But I think there's always lots of other roles of people in your life around community and support that can then play a lot of those roles as well.
I totally appreciate everything everybody said. And I think, being connected to Drew, you are connected to a set of mentors, whether in or out of the classroom. I know in my experience that was the case. That's why I'm here. Like you connect with people and you connect with faculty and you connect with your fellow students and staff. And it has such an effect that it really does impact, sort of the rest of your career, your life, however you want to look at it. And this segues great into our next question. So, everybody has mentioned a Drew experience, and our next question is sort of, what influence has your Drew experience had on your development and journey, and how would you have been supported at Drew as a member of this community? So, as a staff member for Rachel, or as alum, or as a current student, like how has your experience specifically at Drew really kind of influenced you with your development and your journey? And Cass, do you want to go first?
Sure. I mean, I am 100% a product of my Drew experience. I'm fresh out of Drew. The job that I have right now, I got because I did the UN semester. And, the jobs that I applied to were jobs that I was interested in because of what I did at Drew, when I first graduated and I was looking for jobs. And I definitely think that something else was, like Dawn was saying, like the sense of community that you feel at Drew is something that really stays with you. And it's not normal. Like you don't go around the world finding that sense of community immediately. but you can create it, you know, and that can be your literal job, to create this sense of community for other people. And I think that just having that during my college experience was very meaningful, because then I had an idea of where I wanted to go and what I wanted to create for myself and for others when I went out. So that was super important to me. For how would you like to have been supported at Drew? I think that as far as like, I had a lot of great mentors based on like gender and sexuality. I do think that as an international student, it was very much of a shock to come out and be accepted immediately, which is, you know, it's not the worst case scenario, but it is like a weird scenario. I went from like the only person that was gay in my immediate circle to, you know, there is an accepting community and there's all of these things, but I was also very new to a lot of things. And I think that Drew is doing a lot better now, like Elisa was saying, with like getting the first years together and things like that, because that would have been great for me as a first year student, because I felt like everybody else that came in kind of had like way advantage, like they had a DSA in high school and things like that. And I was like, I don't know what this means. I don't know what queer means. I'm very confused. So I think that would have been very useful to me, but I think Drew is definitely moving in the right direction on that.
Thank you. Rachel, do you want to go next?
Yeah, sure. So I think that Drew has, as a young staff member, I think Drew has helped me in so many ways. Like, diversity programming is so fun, is so lit. It just really helped me, you know, like grow as a professional with so many identities, like learning about other identities and also myself. And I think the most rewarding part of it, of the job, is the students. I think, right to Castle's point, it's a tight-knit community. And I never worked at a school where they're like, "Oh, what's your favorite part?" I'm like, "The students are great," and I really mean it. And so I think that I think the students challenge me to do better and stuff like that too. And I think that's what's really important. So a lot of my job is like advocating for marginalized students, and I felt like I needed to start like practicing what I preach. So I'd be like, "Oh yeah, like go stick up for yourself," and stuff like that. And I feel like my students taught me to do that for myself too. So I'm really grateful for that. Something in terms of feeling supported, some ways to do that, because I am still here. I think one of the big things, especially in light of the summers, in light of like COVID, racial injustices, I think like looking at allyship for students and then also staff and stuff like that at Drew. So taking on more of a responsibility to educate yourself or others, and not always looking for the marginalized identities to bring light to something going on in the world. I think that would be a really great way to support me and my identities as a staff member, and also for students of color or just marginalized students in general. And that can just even look like just checking in on marginalized students from time to time, especially with everything going on. And then also just like giving grace is important for a lot of marginalized folks too. You know, we're expected to perform at the same rate as some of our peers when, you know, our world may be falling down around us due to different things that are happening and the inequities that we experience. So I think that is definitely something that Drew's striving towards currently. And so I think we're going to get better with more time and more conversations like this. So yeah, thank you.
Well, Rachel has done a tremendous amount of work and advocating for our students and programming, and we really can't thank her enough for all the amazing stuff she does. So I'm so glad that she chatted about it a little bit. Alyssa, do you want to go next?
Sure. I could tell a little bit about a very specific experience within my theater coursework that has helped me express myself as a sapphic person, as a playwright, as a generally curious person about the world. It's going to sound like a plug for my play, and it is, because I do want people to give me their thoughts on this play. So for my introductory theater playwriting course, I had to work on a one act, and somehow I wrote this very silly, scary, weird one act about surveillance capitalism, sapphic identity, Amazon Alexa, and unrequited crushes, and it's called Digital Sapphism. And it came out of Drew's willingness to help me experiment and explore with this work. I got to experience a reading of the work right before we went home due to the pandemic. Timing was impeccable on that. It was hit the ground running, 2-hour rehearsal, scripts in hand, reading of this play. Working with the cast, and we happened to be all LGBT people in the cast, in the reading cast. And being in the room with them and reading this work and writing these jokes that were highly specific and hearing them get it, that was really special to me. And also putting on the play and hearing folks in the room who had various identities, but, you know, since they had friends, they understood what jokes were happening. Hearing them laugh and hearing them get it and hearing them, you know, laugh at the comedy, but also be scared at the creepy parts of the play. That was something that meant a lot to me, and the play's going to get another reading thanks to Drew being so generous and the theater department in particular supporting playwrights. And also that's a part of my identity as a queer woman, because I was exploring something I was thinking about, an experience that I was seeing as something common or maybe uncommon between, you know, young adult queer women. And I also need to name that my experience at Women's Concerns House has been, I mean, I've stayed there, I think 6 months. It would have been longer, but quarantine, that will be my favorite thing about college. Like, I know that for a fact. I'm not sure when I'm getting back there. I'm not sure if it's going to be senior year next semester. But being a part of that community, working on the programs, planning the National Coming Out Day dance, making the zines, and just like, you know, coming home, see, I call it home, going back to WOCO after women's studies class, like wearing like my sweater and like my, like I call my professor pants, and like I feel like I want to be a women's gender studies student. I'm not going to fit the minor in, but it just felt like I was where I wanted to be. Like I felt like I was myself, and I was learning about myself and my communities, and also, you know, communities I want to be an accomplice to, and that was super special to me. Now, to wrap this up into how I would have liked to have been supported, which I'm going to change the tense a little bit because I'm currently there, and that's what I want to do, is I want to support people more. So that's like the work I want to do. I'm actually kind of working on this for my Civic Scholar Senior project. I'm either going to work on like increasing grief support for students, or for what it means to welcome LGBT students to campus. So what Castle was saying. So I'm thinking about that these days. And I'm wondering the ways in which our you know, orientation events and our recruitment events can go even further in welcoming LGBT students, but also making sure that the systems are in place to welcome them, and that we can say, and that I can say, and anyone else can say with, you know, as much consciousness as they can and as much honesty, yes, this place is good for you. Yes, this place will support you. And I'm also going to name this, like, as a cisgender person who wants to be an accomplice to trans and gender nonconforming people, the school has ways to go in supporting trans and gender nonconforming students when it comes to housing, when it comes to even the simple courtesy of sharing pronouns, and also ensuring folks aren't misgendered. I'm in classes right now where that's a common occurrence. And that does, I mean, I'm not going to speak from the perspective of a trans student, but that's not the environment that's not a safe environment for any student. So those are my thoughts about that question.
Thank you for sharing that with us. And I know, you know, the things that you mentioned, the issues that are still in place, that's something we're definitely addressing and we're hoping to work on. So thank you for bringing that up. And I may connect with you offline so we can talk a little bit more about it. But just to round us up on this question, Dawn, do you want to take the?
Sure. And if I talk too long, just tell me to stop.
Oh, no, keep.
By far, the most impactful thing that happened to me at Drew was moving into the Women's Concerns House. Like, hands down, everything else, just no, like, that's it. I think that before I came to Drew, I mean, I had planned to go to medical school, and I still went to medical school. But, you know, I was a white girl from New Jersey, from a very suburban neighborhood where everybody else was white and nobody was queer. And I was going to go to medical school, and I was going to be a doctor, and just really like this. And I think that moving into the house really opened a huge amount of perspective for me. It's where I felt safe coming out. It shifted how I thought about the world, how I thought about other people, how I thought about myself, how I thought about what kind of doctor I wanted to be. I almost didn't go to medical school because I couldn't figure out how to marry what I saw as a very narrow career with the expansiveness and impact that I wanted to make in the world. And I think that living in that house and talking to those folks who are still my friends, Mickey and I are watching The Untamed together virtually. And, you know, Mickey and I lived in the house together. And we, at the last reunion, we undermined, what's it called? We called everyone from the house and we told them to all register for our reunion and to show up on the call, even if it wasn't their year, so that we could all get together again and have this community. I think that in my work in the women, I became a women's studies minor because I lived in the house, and that's what you did. That's how you learned about the world. In my career, when I'm talking with new staff and I'm talking about the work that we're doing with marginalized communities, I quote Audre Lorde, right? It's like, I would never have done that before unless I had had that experience. I think that it helped me find my voice. I know that, Wendy, I probably didn't talk at all when I was in college, and now I talk all the time. And some of that was the professionalism of medical school. You don't have a choice, you just learn to talk. But I think that experience, Harnan, like that was it for me. That was life-changing and has continued to influence the career choices I make, the friendship choices I make, the way that I move in the world, the way that I hire, the way that I provide medical care to other people, like all of it. It completely has shaped me and my identity and my, I don't know, the whole view. You know, Drew is not, you know, to think about what could be better at Drew, like this was what, it was a long time ago, right? I don't know that the Drew of today is the Drew that I went to. I would like to think that the world continues to progress and things continue to change. I know that when I was there, being a health profession student and a women's studies minor felt incredibly discordant, and that there wasn't a lot of connection to feminism and science and feminism and health professions, and something that I think would have been more helpful to me as I was approaching medical school, to have that some connection there. And maybe that is happening now. That'd be great if that was happening now. But to be able to live, so I wasn't able to live in the house until my junior year, which was the first year of the house. And I would still live there if I could. We do stuff and connect with each other still now. And yeah, stuff.
I love all the theme house love. I mean, Women's Concerns is our oldest theme house on campus. And, you know, if you look at it, and I love talking about Drew history. And if you look at it in terms of the theme houses that Drew really sort of have brought us to Launch, right? Like, so you have, you know, Launch brings together all the amazing things that Drew does, and makes it accessible and makes it something that students can use tangibly. And the theme houses really are doing that and have been doing that for so long. And for you to be an alum and to talk about your experience in WOCO, you know, how many years ago and how impactful it was. I mean, that's just kind of a testament to what we're doing and what we kind of want to do moving forward. So I really appreciate you sharing that information. And just to give you a perspective, as an alum, I graduated, you know, a long time ago. And it's funny because Drew has changed, and I see students now that remind me so much of students that I went to school with, and the students in Women's Concerns and WOCO. Some of the students, I'll meet them and I'm like, oh my God, that is that person. It's very interesting how you see it generationally. That is a tangent, I apologize. So let me move on to the next question. So let's see. So how do you recommend that we engage in or respond to our current societal and global challenges? So i.e. like systematic racism, systematic poverty, pandemic, economy, global warming, international relations. Let's see, Castle, do you want to go first?
Yeah, I think that it's super important that we engage in those conversations, in those topics, even if it's like internally. I think the first thing is to embrace the awkward and the uncomfortable, and that it's gonna hurt, you know, to learn about tough topics. It hurts because you might be the person benefiting of the system that is in place. You're not always in the position of saying this is unjust to me. Sometimes you are benefiting from these processes, right? So I think you have to embrace this awkwardness, this uncomfortable feeling of knowing that the world is just not a fair place. You know, and some people are very familiar with the knowledge that the world is not fair, but for some people it might just be the first time they're learning about this, and that's important. Like, it's super important for them to recognize it. Also, I think that something that I have learned is that it is incredibly exhausting to be the person that educates other people how the world is being unfair to you. You know, so like, as I said, I was the only Mexican person for a very long time at Drew, right? Like my first semester was the 2016 election, and everybody was like, why are you upset all the time? And I'm like, I am upset. Do not ask me to explain, you know, like it is not the right moment for me. And I realized that before I had that experience, I was always asking for people to explain things to me, you know? So I have changed that radically. Like, I have a lot of friends that are Armenian right now, and there's a lot of things going on in Armenia right now. And the first thing that I did was like, I'm not going to ask you to explain things to me. Just, you know, point me in the direction of your favorite resource. You know, how can I educate myself? Because this is work that I have to do as an ally. It is not your job to educate me on this. And I think that took me a long time to learn. So if all of you can get a head start on that, like, I think the world is going to be better.
Thank you so much for sharing that. Rachel, do you want to go next?
Yeah. Literally Castle kind of pretty much said what I was about to say, but yeah, start a dialogue about it. I think it's important to do your own research, and like Google is a great place to start like educating yourselves and others. But I think something that we tend to do out of privilege is ignore things, and so I think that it's important that like we don't ignore it. I think of like the news this week about Jonathan Price being murdered by police. I don't think anyone has spoken about it yet, in terms of like thinking about like meetings I've been in, or maybe on just different Zoom calls. And I'm like, if people aren't talking about it at my meetings as a staff member, are people asking students like, how are you feeling? And I also think about like, for example, Queer in the Forest that we're doing now is a really great way to engage. I think that it's only day 2, and I feel like I've learned so much and talked to so many different people from so many different backgrounds of within the LGBTQIA+ community, and it's been great. And I also think about, for example, like Black trans women, they have the highest murder rate in the country, but we don't talk about it. We kind of ignore it, right? And their life expectancy is 33 to 35 years old, which is very young. And so I think the word that I really liked about this question was, how do you recommend that we engage? And something that I try to challenge myself every day to put myself in other people's shoes. And so for Trans Day of Remembrance, which is November 20th, we're gonna do almost like it's gonna be called a walk, roll and stroll, which is for 3.3 miles to bring awareness to Black trans women being, you know, the highest murder rate in the country. So there's so many different ways that you can engage, and I think something I really enjoy doing in my job at Drew is like recently in virtual times making a diversity newsletter every single week. I feel like people are like, Rachel, you do too much like every week, but I was like, I feel like I'm learning so many new things and talking to so many different community members about their identities, and it's just new information for myself as well, because I think what's important too is that I'm continuously learning and growing, and I feel like that's important too if we want to engage and talk about these different issues. So yes, thank you.
Thank you so much for that. Alyssa, do you want to go next?
All I have to do is just underline, star, and highlight everything that Castle and Rachel just said.
Thank you. I totally agree. I completely and totally agree. Dawn, do you want to go?
I think the only other thing that I would think about is, you know, all of us have situations where we have power in the room and where we don't. And to take the situations where we have power and use them to help empower people with less power, to create safer spaces, to raise topics that are uncomfortable, to not be afraid to do that stuff on behalf of, as an ally, on behalf of other folks, to rate and not, but yet not to speak for or over, but to help raise up other people's voices. And then also to make space for people to express their grief. Because I think that with a lot of the stuff that's happening in the world, it's hard, and it's hard on lots of different people in lots of different ways. And to create a space for somebody to be able to sit with that and feel safe with that, and not have to push it down all the time or ignore it, I think is also a really important part of this.
Thank you so much. So we're at our final question. So what advice would you give to students or alums, or let me start again. What advice would you give to students or alums who identify with your identity or experience? So how would you help them? How would you be the mentor to them? Let's see, Castle, do you want to go first?
Sure. I have two advice. The first one is that you take Women and Gender Studies 101. Like Alyssa said it, it's life-changing, it's life-saving. A Women's and Gender Studies education is, you don't have to major in it, you don't have to minor in it. It's just, it changes the way you see everything. Carolina's agreeing with me. It will change your life. And if you are a queer person, if you are a woman, it will save your life maybe. Like I am in Mexico, and I am finding that I am incredibly privileged because I had this education from the get-go. I was 19 when I started reading feminist theory and all of that because I was in college. Whereas like women are being murdered in Mexico every day, and they don't have the resources to talk about it and to talk about this injustice and everything because they don't have the college experience that I had. So it is very, it has opened my eyes to how like I didn't just enjoy the classes that I had. It's just like, it really changes who you are. So that's number one. I think it should be mandatory. I say this every time, but until it is, I recommend people take it. And second, to really pay attention to the places where you feel comfortable, and to take note on why you felt comfortable and why you felt safe, and so that you can make sure that the next time is your responsibility to set up a room, that you can make it a safe and welcoming environment. And that goes from, adding your pronouns to the Zoom thing that I will figure out how to do, to, how you present yourself, wearing a pin that says, that has the rainbow, so that people know that they don't have to come out to you, or that they can come out to you. So I think that having this running list of things that made you feel at ease and safe and welcome are very helpful when it is your time to set up the room.
Thank you so much. Rachel, do you want to go next?
Yeah, I agree with Castle. Women's studies is like chef's kiss. It's so great. Like, it's literally, it changed my life. It saved my life, right? I learned about intersectionality and lost my mind. So I think about, and it made me just realize too, bell hooks, amazing. But yeah, I would just definitely say, like, find your community, right? Find people who validate your own identities. Find your own joy, because people can't take that from you. And don't be afraid to step outside of your comfort zone when you can, and when you're feeling comfortable to do so. Sorry, I had a little list going. Don't waste your time and energy on people who don't respect or validate your identities. I think I did that a lot. I was like, oh, like, I'm gonna debate like why Black lives matter. I was like, why am I debating if my life matters, or queer lives or trans lives, those things, right? And then also just like, don't equate your success to the dominant culture. I think a lot of times we all do it just because we're raised in a white supremacist society. And so I think that's something we have to unlearn and decolonize ourselves to think about. And then I think recently I've kind of just started to think about having a voice to speak out and advocate for yourself and others when you're feeling safe and able to do so. So they kind of, I feel like they expect us as, people of marginalized identities to be quiet. And I actually put in an Audre Lorde quote. So I'm so happy Dawn brought that up. But, I'm not going to say the whole quote, but just share what, speak like it. Well, I'll do part of it. So what is most important must be spoken, made verbal, and shared, even at the risk of it having it bruised or misunderstood. That the speaking profits me beyond any other effect. And that's Audre Lorde. So go read her book too. So that's my advice.
You even had a quote. Well, thank you. We appreciate that. Alyssa, do you want to go next?
Sure. And to echo what Castle said about taking women's gender studies, before I knew Castle was on this panel, I wrote in my Google Doc planning for this event that my RA Castle once told me that women's studies should be a requirement. And I subscribe to that belief 100%. I agree. Take women's studies if you're a current student. It is relevant no matter your field of study. It is relevant. As for general advice, know that you can start immediately making a difference. I mean, you do your homework, of course, that you got to do your homework on how to make a difference, but you don't have to become a big fancy junior or a big fancy senior to make a difference. You can make a difference your first week on campus. Be intentional in your choices, but you can do it. College is amazing in that way. In high school, you may have to wait a little bit. And not saying that the gates will immediately be open once you get to school. There will be things that you have no clue about, and that's normal. But know that you can do impactful things for yourself and for others very quickly. That's what I have to say to all students listening.
Thank you. And Dawn.
Just to go back, like, I think community and connections, finding those places and those people that you can feel safe with and that you can challenge yourself with, that can challenge you, that you can make you feel uncomfortable and safe at the same time. I think that finding that is really, really important. I think the other piece for me is that, I forget if it was Rachel or Castle who was talking about this, but about safety, right? That not every situation is going to feel safe. And you don't have to put yourself in situations where you don't feel safe. So if you don't feel safe disclosing something that you don't need to disclose, you don't have to. And yet there are times you're going to, but being able to be conscious and thoughtful about making choices and being okay with your choices of when to be the person who's leading the pack and when it's okay to be the person who's hanging back, and moderating how you move through the world and being okay with those choices, I think, is also another piece of it.
Thank you so much for sharing that. So we've come to the end of the scripted questions. Does anybody have any questions for our amazing panel? Please feel free to unmute yourself and go ahead and ask.
I have a question.
I'm also monitoring the chat, so if anybody has a question that they want to write down, I can monitor.
I had a question.
Sure.
So like, I'm not 100% sure how to word it, but like, so like, I'm out to my family and like, they all know it, but like, have you guys had experiences where like you actually had your partner with you and you were like, oh wow, this is like, I did not realize how hard it would be. Like, they already know I'm gay, but it's not the normal boyfriend girlfriend type thing. How did you deal with that if you went through it?
I could talk a little bit about that. So me too, I'm out to my parents. I think when I first came out to my parents, I came out as bisexual. So my parents just grasped onto that snatch of hope, you know, she's going to end up with a man. There's a 50-50 chance, you know? So I think there is a difference between being out and being accepted. And it's really tough to come to terms to that. I think the most important thing is that you are out and you accept yourself, you know, and that you love yourself and that you have a safe community inside and outside of the house. But I think that it was really painful to understand that you don't come out once, you know, you come out again and again and again, and you come out at work and you come out in class and you come out to your parents and then you come out to your parents again and then you come out to your parents again when you have a partner of your same sex, things like that, or even just in conversation. So it is very exhausting, and there is not like a one solution on how to, you know, make things better and make things less painful. But it is okay to be upset, and it is okay to feel the pain. And the most important thing you can do is take care of yourself, right? So like, acknowledge when things that are said to you, they hurt, or acknowledge when things that are said to you are you know, insensitive and things like that. And if you have a relationship with your parents in which you can bring up something later, like, hey, I know this wasn't the intention, but when you said this, it kind of hurt, then do it. And if you don't have that kind of relationship, acknowledge to yourself that you don't deserve, you know, the hate or the hurtful comments. So I don't think there's like a, you know, blanket statement, but just to know that, you know, I'm right there with you. I think your experience is super valid, and, you know, I wish for you the best. And if you ever need anything, I can drop my email there.
I think the other thing to realize is that your parents are coming out too, right? So you've had this experience, and you've come to a sense of self-acceptance, and you're starting those conversations with your parents. But every time something changes in your life and the way that they see you, it's a whole new process for them as well. And it's challenging for everybody. And to try to have some patience with them. I feel very fortunate in some ways that I did not have to come out to my parents. My sister outed me to my parents while I was in college, and they showed up. And I just found this out like 3 years ago of how this came to be. So they showed up and were like, we know. And watching them, because I was already in a place of great self-acceptance, and watching them sort of mature and grow, and their fears of how much they loved me and what that meant to them, and how did they reconcile the expectations and what they imagined the life for their daughter would be like versus what it is, and how, you know, how were they going to keep me safe because they loved me, all of those things. It's a really complicated process. There's some really interesting work, just to quote some studies, because I'm a doctor, that's what we do. So Caitlin Ryan has a great project called the Family Acceptance Project. I don't know if people have heard about it, but it really looks at levels of parents' acceptance of their children around both their sexual orientation and their gender identity, and looking at things from complete acceptance to varying degrees of tolerance to intolerance, and correlating it really closely with the impact of the intolerance on their children's HIV status, suicide rates, drug use, like all of these really negative things. And that parents ultimately really want the best for their children, and they get confused sometimes about what best looks like. So, you know, hiring a man to rape their lesbian daughter so that she'll then be straight may be a parent's version of helping their kid, but it's not. Right? We know it's not. And when you look at the studies and the data on even small degrees of tolerance and acceptance from a parent can have this huge impact on their children's lives and reducing rates of bad things. And then showing some of those to parents, and there's some great videos also around that, have really changed parents' views to become more accepting and tolerant, because most parents really do love their children and want the best for their children, and are just grappling with how do they figure it out and how do they do that. And so perhaps being able to share some of that stuff that's out in the world for parents, and around specifically on the Family Acceptance Project, because it's really great videos and great work, might also be a good resource.
Does anybody have any other questions or comments? I have a question for Alyssa and Dawn. With your time in WOCO, Women's Concerns, what was the most impactful event that you have been a part of? You're both giggling.
Do you want the one that we're supposed to talk about, or the one that we're just not supposed to talk about? So we had house meetings, and I have vague memories of this, not fantastic memories of this. We had house meetings where the men who lived in the house were not allowed to speak for half the meeting, which was just, it was really watching them struggle with wanting to speak and not being able to, and, you know, because women have had that experience for so long in so many rooms. I think that was pretty cool. But most of the amazing experiences that I had were just around being in the house, right? Of sitting on the stairs late at night and talking to people, or waking up early on Saturday morning and baking banana bread together. Because when we were in the house, we had many kitchens, many kitchens. And so hanging out in the house and cooking together, or baking together, or talking, I think that was pretty impactful. The other thing was, and I think we talked about this the last reading, and one of the most memorable experiences I have was there was 5 or 6 of us, and we were taking one of Wendy Colmar's classes, and there was a paper due, and we all procrastinated it until the night before. And so we were all staying up all night, except for Dee Dee, to work on their paper. Dee Dee had most of it done. And around 1 o'clock or 2 o'clock in the morning, we had all just had it. We were exhausted and frustrated and couldn't write anymore. And so we all ran outside, and they had just knocked down the fruit tree field, to put in what's now the soccer field. And there were big mounds of mud. And so we climbed up this mound of mud in the middle of our night, and we pulled up our shirts and did, bury your breast to the moon, and then pushed each other off the top of the mud pile, trying to be feminist of the mountain. And so it's not the school, it's not the academic things, but again, I speak to the connections and the ability to play with each other and challenge each other, that I think had the most impact for me.
Thank you.
Oh, sorry. Was someone gonna?
No, go ahead.
I am amazed to hear that like baking banana bread is like, I guess, baked into the like culture of WOCO, because like we still bake pastries and cakes, and I am so nostalgic for WOCO these days. I have some playlists that just put me right back to sitting there while someone is cooking dinner and someone else is shouting, "Hey, anybody got another copy of The Bluest Eye?" Like that's just WOCO, like just shouting like, "Oh, you have this essay? Oh, I need this essay for this class." I recall just getting accepted to WOCO and being, as a second semester first year, being absolutely so excited. And the next day was the Take Back the Night walk. And it was a small group of people, but it was such an incredible experience. And I wanted to plan it. I was on the planning team, quarantine, so it didn't happen. But I remember just walking with the group, and like we're doing the chants and just thinking like, this is what I wanted for college. Like I wanted to involve myself in things that had an impact, and to do things that showed solidarity and made active solidarity, and that was right before I even got to live in WOCO. The house meetings are, and so I'm thinking of them as in past tense because I really don't know the next time I'm going to get back there. I've also loved like the house-to-house relationships, because, La Casa Latina was new, and Castle was the house house assistant HA of that. Then there's also ABC House, and just like knowing that row of townhouses has interests in like their own identities and making the campus better. Like that's what that group of housing is about. And just those really fun moments where it's like nowhere else can this happen but WOCO. Like shouting that I need this quote for this paper for women's studies. No, I mean, not nowhere else, but like it's a very WOCO experience. And it's, walking into the door shouting, "Oh, I'm annoyed about this piece of news. I'm annoyed about this class," and giving a very highly specific like reason having to do with LGBT issues. That's WOCO in a nutshell. And also just watching the movies and talking about, we watched Janelle Monáe's Dirty Computer and did an analysis of that because we wanted to and because we could and because women's studies is always relevant. I'm going to stop my rant because I could talk about WOCO for hours because I miss it dearly.
Well, when we do some panels for the theme houses, Alyssa, I think you're going to get tabbed. Castle, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, no, I think WOCO is the best example I have for what I said earlier about like take notes on the places that you feel included and safe and make sure that you can make that. So when I was in my junior year, I had a very rough time and I spent like all of my time in Woco. I didn't live there, but I was there all the time because my friend lived there. And it was an inclusive place. There was always something cooking. You know, they were always happy to have me cook. There were books everywhere, you know, so that when I had the opportunity to create my own theme house, I was like, it's gonna be Woco with a different focus, you know? So I think it's like a perfect example, but I was also like Dawn, I was like, what stories can I tell and which ones I can't, but like Woco is permanent. You know, Woco really is super important, and I really hope La Casa can be that in a couple of years, you know, COVID permitting. But, you know, I think Woco is permanently like on my skin. Like I got my first tattoo at Woco. Like that's all I have to say about that. It's a great place.
Thank you all for, I'm sorry for putting you on the spot with the unscripted question, but I was very interested to see what you would say. The interesting thing about Woco is, you know, how it's evolved over the years too, but it still stays the same. You know, it was in Hannon House, you know, back originally. And then when I was a senior, it actually shifted to the townhouses. And I remember, you know, my friends being very, very concerned about the changing of the structure, and we're not going to be in this house anymore. We're going to be in a townhouse, and it's so different. And it really, watching it over the years, it really has retained itself, which is really comforting and wonderful. I didn't live in Woco as a student, but I spent a lot of time there. I mean, I have a lot of friends there. So I too really, like, I hold it very dear too. So thank you for your stories. Does anybody have any other questions for our panel? This has been such a wonderful conversation.
Okay, first off, thank you all so much. I love this, and I'm so glad to like have these conversations. I wish that, like, I sent the link to like 5 different friend groups. It's fine. We're not there. That one of them showed up. Robbie showed up, so I was proud of him. We love Robbie. My question, because that's what this is supposed to be, is questions. My question is, like, would you change any part of your experiences with gender/sexuality, like, just in general, to make? Do you think like there are pieces of it that you would change that would continue to allow you to be who you are without like, yeah, I'll just leave it there, let you.
I'm sorry, can you repeat the question? I think I was going in one direction and then you switched on me. I'm sorry.
Would you change any part of your experiences with gender and or sexuality? And like the side note was, and would it affect who you are today?
I think that for me, like, I wouldn't change a singular part of my identity. You know, I think that has had positive things in my life, negative things in my life, but I wouldn't change anything. But if I could change anything, if I could go back, I would go back to like my middle school, even my elementary school self. And I think that, I mean, I was always kind of a nerd, you know, I was always like good in school. That was what I did. I was good at school. And the other people that were good at school were other girls. So we were forced to compete a lot, you know, there could only be one person at the top of the class. And because we were girls, we were very nasty to each other because we were, you know, taught to be nasty to each other. Like, girls can't be friends, girls will betray you, things like that. And I didn't have good female friends until I got to Drew, you know, because I think that I was conditioned to not trust girls. And I think that my experience I suffered a lot from it, I think. And it didn't realize on me like until like maybe in my sophomore year, things like that I don't have to hate women. You know, like, you don't have to do it. You're just taught to do it, and you can unlearn that. So if I could change anything, I would go back and I would do that. But as far as like changing any part of my identity, I wouldn't.
If I could add something similar to what Castle mentioned about, you know, thinking about childhood, middle school, and, you know, being in school before high school and college, if I could get in the time machine and have some books and some resources and go back to my younger self, well, I was a Catholic school student. I went to Catholic school till 8th grade. I didn't know gay people existed. Imagine my surprise when I realized that I was gay people. So I didn't know that what I felt existed. I just thought everyone wanted to marry girls. That's just what I thought. And but I didn't know that existed. So if I could go back in time and, I'm thinking about this, this is something that we can do, like we can make this happen for future generations, for younger kids, is just making sure that they know that gender expansiveness is real. Being queer exists, and a lot of people in the world are queer, and just not because that's where I think, to be highly simplistic about it, that's where like coming out comes from. And I'm just imagining what could have happened if I didn't come out, because like I almost did, because I didn't know being LGBT existed. So I'm wondering, and we can make that happen. We can make that happen for the next generation and for current young people as well. Just being honest about the beauty of the world, really, and the size of the queer community. It is ginormous. It is a lot of the world, and a lot of folks in the community are doing some of the best things for the world in the world. So that's what I want to add. If I could change something, I would bring my older self back to my younger self, which I try to do in my plays. But quite literally, I would just tell 5-year-old me what was up.
Yeah, I agree. I think the only thing that I would change is like I just wish that I like knew terminology sooner. Like knew, like basically I would just want to be more open earlier in my life, because there are so many people that are just like queer, part of the community. Like half my high school is like queer, and I'm like, we were all sitting here like hiding it. Like, and so I think that like is one thing I would change. And then also like too, because I feel like so much of my identity was, oh well, you're Black, and I was like, but I'm not just Black, I'm a woman, and then I'm also queer. And so like I feel like that is something I wish that I had more knowledge about. But again, they don't teach like women's studies in high school or middle school and all those things. And so like I do hope for the future, for future students and people, like they touch upon intersectionality a lot more than they do now. So yeah.
I think the one thing I would, if I were to go back, I mean, childhood, and that feels like a really long time ago. But I think about even just going back to Drew or to medical school. I think that the one thing, if I were to do it differently, I think I would think a little bit more about self-protection and when to be out in the world and fully myself, and when to hold back a little bit. And I think that I didn't get that you had to. I mean, in many ways, I grew up very fortunate and had a great experience at Drew, where I didn't have to do that. It was okay. And then to suddenly hit this wall of medical school, where it's just a completely different world. I think that if I were to go back, I would tell myself to be just a little more careful and a little more cautious. But that being said, I think that having had the experiences that I had in medical school shaped who I am professionally. And so, had I done it differently, I think it would have ended up differently and not as great a way. So it feels a little conflicted. But certainly if I were to give advice to the next generation, I would talk to people about when to learn to assess safety before just jumping in with both feet.
Thank you all so much. I think we're right about at our time. I want to be mindful of that. This has been a really fantastic conversation. I am honored that I got to moderate it. I don't know, Daniel, do you have anything you want to add before we finish?
Just in closing, how blessed we are to have you in our community, how humbled we feel about your openness and willingness to share, and appreciative. Like your stories are so moving and so powerful. So thank you so much for being here, for sharing such meaningful parts of who you are, and sharing your advice with students. We're recording this session, so this session will be consumed afterwards with more participants. Steph, you did a fantastic job. I also want to name Wendy, who was so instrumental for us to bring this panel together. And I cannot believe between Steph and Wendy, it's like they knew everyone ever out there. It was, the network that you both have is so impressive. But thank you. This is such an honor, and we're so appreciative of you sharing your story.
Thank you all so much. And just to give a quick plug, this is Queering the Forest Week at Drew. So there's virtual programming happening. We actually just launched Drew's first LGBTQ resource page. So you can check it out at drew.edu/LGBTQ. And you can see the full Queering the Forest schedule listed there. You can also get some cool downloads and graphics, like Rachel is sporting the fancy Zoom background communications created for us. And you can sort of check it out. It's brand new. It's a work in progress, but it is something that is there, and we're really excited about it. So definitely check it out. And thank you all so much for being a part of this panel. As I said, it was an honor to moderate it. And good night.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.